Have you ever been betrayed by someone you loved, someone you trusted with everything, only for them to leave you, shattering your world? Imagine that betrayal coming from not just your partner, but from your own family. That's exactly what happened to Sarah, a woman whose life was turned upside down when her husband, Greg, did the unthinkable. He left her, not for another woman, but for her own sister. It was a devastating blow that no one saw coming. Sarah and Greg had always seemed like the perfect couple. High school sweethearts, they had been through thick and thin together and had even built a family with two young kids. But as the years passed, cracks began to form in their seemingly perfect life. Sarah never could have imagined how deep those cracks were, or how they would eventually lead to her husband's betrayal in the most unimaginable way. At first, Sarah thought it was a temporary rough patch. Every marriage goes through tough times, right? She tried everything: counseling, date nights, even giving Greg more space, believing that if she did everything right, they could fix things. But then the unthinkable happened. One day, Greg came home with an announcement that would change Sarah's life forever. He had fallen in love with someone else. That someone? Her younger sister, Emily. For Sarah, hearing those words was like being hit by a freight train. The woman who she had grown up with, the sister who was always there for her, had now become her worst enemy. She couldn't understand how it happened. How could Emily, the person she trusted the most, betray her so completely? How could Greg, a man she had spent years building a life with, throw it all away for a younger, more exciting version of someone he already knew? The betrayal sent Sarah into a whirlwind of emotions: shock, anger, disbelief. But it didn't stop there. It wasn't just the affair that rocked her to her core, it was the way her entire world seemed to be falling apart. Her friends didn't know what to say, and family gatherings became impossible. People who once sympathized with her started taking sides. The rift between her and Emily grew deeper, and her relationship with Greg became almost unbearable. As time passed, Sarah tried to move on. She focused on her kids, rebuilt her life from the ashes of her broken marriage, and even started seeing new people. But no matter what she did, she couldn't shake the memory of the betrayal. It haunted her. It made her question herself, her worth, and the choices she had made. And just when she thought she had finally come to terms with the past and moved forward, something happened. Something so unexpected that it left Sarah speechless. Years later, Sarah got a call. It was from Emily. After years of silence, after everything that had happened, her sister was asking to meet. But why now? What could Emily possibly want after all this time? Was it guilt? A plea for forgiveness? Or something much darker? Something Sarah couldn't even begin to comprehend? What Emily said next left Sarah in shock, and it's something no one, not even Sarah, could have predicted. The truth behind Greg's departure, Emily's involvement, and the twisted chain of events that followed. It was all about to come to light. And just as the pieces started to fall into place, the phone call ended, leaving Sarah with more questions than answers. What could this meeting possibly mean for Sarah's future? Will she find closure? Or will the truth be far more complicated than she ever imagined? Stay tuned, because the answers will change everything. The phone call from Emily hung in the air like a heavy, unanswered question. Sarah couldn't quite wrap her mind around it. Years of silence, years of anger, and now, out of nowhere, Emily was reaching out. What could possibly be so important now? What could have driven her sister to pick up the phone after all this time? Sarah wasn't sure she even wanted to know the answer, but a part of her, small, buried deep inside, felt a strange pull, like the faintest thread of hope that maybe, just maybe, there could be some kind of explanation. But where to begin? Sarah had tried to forget. She had tried to move on from the chaos that had swept through her life all those years ago. After Greg had left her for Emily, it was like an earthquake hit her entire existence. She felt betrayed not only by her husband, but by the one person who she thought would always have her back. How could Emily, her own sister, someone who had grown up with her, someone she had shared so many memories with, do something so unimaginable? The days that followed Greg's departure were a blur. There was the anger, the heartbreak, the sleepless nights spent staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything. She spent months asking herself the same question. Why? Why did this happen? Was it something she had done wrong? Had she not been enough for Greg? And why? Why had Emily, of all people, become the one who tore her world apart? It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the way everything had unraveled after that. Greg moved out quickly. He didn't fight for their family. He didn't try to fix things. It was as if he'd made up his mind, and nothing Sarah said or did could change it. They'd both known it was over, but the suddenness of it all took Sarah by surprise. Emily, on the other hand, had come in with an apologetic face, as if trying to ease Sarah's pain. But underneath it all, Sarah knew. She knew the truth. The tension between them grew like a thick, suffocating fog, and it wasn't long before Sarah couldn't even bear to look at her sister anymore. It wasn't until after the divorce was final, after the dust settled, that Sarah really started to rebuild. She had to, for her kids, for herself. She threw herself into work, into her passions, into creating a life without Greg and Emily. There were days when she still cried, those hidden, quiet moments when no one was around, when the weight of it all was too much to bear. But as time went on, she found strength in places she hadn't expected. Her friends rallied around her. She found a new sense of independence that she never knew she had. And slowly, she began to date again, meeting new people who brought a different energy into her life. But there was always a piece of her that felt incomplete, a nagging emptiness, a feeling that she hadn't gotten the full truth. Years passed, and Sarah thought she had it all figured out, until Emily called. Her heart pounded as she sat in her kitchen, staring at the phone. She remembered all the moments of pain, the fights, the words that had been said in anger, the unanswered questions. The phone went silent in Sarah's hand, and for a moment she just stared at it in disbelief. She had been left with more questions than ever. What was Emily trying to say? What truth had she been hiding all these years? And why did it feel like everything she had known about her marriage, about her sister, about her life, was about to come undone? Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that everything she thought she knew was a lie, that there was a deeper, darker truth that had been buried for years, waiting to surface, and now it seemed like she was on the edge of finding out just how far the lies went. What would this revelation mean for Sarah, for Emily, for Greg, and how would it all change the lives of those still caught in the web of their past mistakes? One thing was certain: the answers were coming, and they would leave no one untouched. But what Emily hadn't told her, the truth that Sarah so desperately needed to hear, was still just out of reach. Would Emily have the courage to finish what she had started, or would Sarah have to uncover the rest on her own? The tension was palpable, and as Sarah stared at her phone, she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Sarah's heart raced as she stared at the phone in her hand. Emily's words echoed in her mind, each one sinking deeper, filling her with a mix of dread and anticipation. It might change everything, Emily had said. What could possibly be so earth-shattering that after all these years of silence, Emily couldn't bring herself to say it? She took a deep breath, fighting the urge to call her sister back right away. But as the minutes ticked by, the curiosity gnawed at her. This was more than just the end of a marriage. This was more than the betrayal of her own flesh and blood. It was a truth, a hidden secret that had been buried for years, and now it was coming to the surface. As Sarah replayed the conversation over and over in her mind, her thoughts began to form a picture. What if Emily wasn't just apologizing for the affair? What if there was something else? What if Emily had been manipulated into it? Could Greg have been behind it all in a way Sarah never even imagined? The more she thought about it, the more the pieces didn't add up, and the more it seemed like something larger was at play. Finally, unable to stand the suspense any longer, Sarah picked up her phone again, dialing Emily's number. This time, the phone rang longer before Emily picked up. Her voice sounded exhausted. Sarah, I don't know if you're ready to hear this, but I have to tell you the truth. I'm sorry for what I've done, but it wasn't just my fault. It wasn't just Greg's fault. There's more to this story. Much more. Sarah's pulse quickened. She could feel the weight of Emily's words pressing on her. What do you mean? What more is there? Emily took a deep breath. Do you remember years ago when everything seemed to be falling apart? When Greg started pulling away from you? When we? She paused, then continued, her voice trembling. It wasn't just that he was unhappy. He was being manipulated too. There was someone else in the picture, someone who has been pulling the strings all along. And it wasn't me. It wasn't even Greg. Sarah's mind spun. What? Who are you talking about? There's someone else, Sarah. Someone who has been secretly controlling everything behind the scenes. Someone you never would have suspected. Someone close to both of us. The silence on the other end was deafening. Sarah's chest tightened, and she could barely catch her breath. Who, Emily? Who? And that's when it hit her. A name, a single word flashed through her mind. She couldn't believe it. She didn't want to believe it. But everything suddenly made sense. It was their mother. Mom, Sarah whispered, the realization hitting her like a tidal wave. Emily's voice broke as she confirmed it. Yes, Mom. She knew all along. She had her reasons. She was the one who pushed Greg and me together. She's the one who made sure you and Greg drifted apart. She made sure I was the one who would be there when you were at your lowest. The truth crashed down on Sarah like a heavy weight. All these years she had blamed Emily. She had blamed Greg. She had blamed herself. But the truth was, the betrayal started much earlier, and it wasn't just about an affair. It was about manipulation, control, and the darkest corners of a family that Sarah had never thought to question. Emily's voice quivered. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I never wanted to hurt you. But Mom, she convinced me it was for the best. She made me believe that I had to be with Greg, that you were better off without him, that I was the only one who could make things right. Sarah's thoughts were a whirlwind. All the signs, all the moments when she felt that something wasn't quite right. Those moments suddenly became crystal clear. It wasn't just a betrayal of,
Was this going to be some kind of apology? Was Emily finally going to admit what she had done? Sarah didn't know if she could handle another conversation about the past. She didn't know if she could bear to face Emily again after everything. But curiosity gnawed at her. After all, she was the one who had been left behind. She deserved to know why, to hear the truth. With trembling hands, she pressed the button to call Emily back. The phone rang twice before Emily picked up, her voice shakier than Sarah remembered. Sarah, hi, Emily said, her tone soft and uncertain, like she was testing the waters. What do you want? Sarah's voice was sharp, filled with years of unspoken hurt. I don't know where to start, Emily began. I know I've hurt you, and I don't expect you to forgive me. I need to explain. Sarah's mind raced. Explain. After all this time? After everything that had happened? What could possibly be left to explain? You can explain all you want, Sarah said, her voice laced with frustration. "But there's nothing you can say to make this okay." "I know, but I think you deserve to know what really happened. You deserve the truth. You deserve to understand why everything went down the way it did." There was silence between them, heavy and uncomfortable. Sarah wasn't sure she was ready to hear it, but a part of her couldn't resist. "Fine," she said, barely above a whisper. "Tell me. I'm listening." Emily took a deep breath. "It wasn't just me, Sarah. It wasn't just Greg. There was something deeper, something neither of us saw until it was too late." The words didn't make sense at first. What did she mean by that? Something deeper. Something neither of them saw. Sarah's mind was racing now, her pulse quickening. She wasn't sure she wanted to hear this, but she couldn't stop herself from listening. "What do you mean?" she demanded. Emily hesitated, the weight of her words clearly hanging over her. "Sarah, it wasn't just about Greg and me. There were things that happened, things you don't know about, things that no one told you, but you need to hear it. Because if you don't, you'll never understand what really happened." A cold chill ran down Sarah's spine. She had already been through so much. Could it get worse? What could possibly be left that she hadn't already been through? What was this new revelation that Emily was hinting at? The tension in the air was unbearable. Just as Sarah opened her mouth to demand more, Emily's voice cracked. I don't know if I can say it. I don't know if I can tell you the rest. It might change everything." And just like that, the conversation ended. Love. It was a betrayal of everything Sarah had ever known about her family. The foundation of her entire life had been built on lies. Her voice cracked as she finally spoke. "Why didn't you tell me, Emily? Why keep this secret for so long?" "I was scared," Emily admitted softly. "I was scared of what Mom would do if I ever spoke up. I was scared of what it would do to our family. And I was scared of losing you." Sarah didn't know how to process it. Her entire life had been shaped by people she thought she could trust. But the truth was, those closest to her had all played a part in the web of deceit that had destroyed everything she held dear. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. How could they do this to her? How could her own mother orchestrate such an elaborate scheme to tear her world apart? But even as the anger surged, there was a deeper feeling bubbling up. Grief. Grief for the family she thought she had. Grief for the years lost in a fog of betrayal and manipulation. And strangely enough, grief for her sister. Emily had been a victim too. "I don't know what to say, Emily," Sarah finally whispered. "I need time to process this. I need to think." "I understand," Emily said quietly. I had to tell you. You deserve to know the truth." As Sarah ended the call, she sat in silence, the weight of everything crashing down on her. Her world had just been shattered and rebuilt in a way she hadn't been prepared for. The answers she had been looking for, those long, unanswered questions about her marriage, her family, and the betrayal that had taken away so much, were no longer simple. In the days that followed, Sarah struggled to make sense of it all. She talked to friends, sought therapy, and spent hours reflecting on everything that had come to light. She learned to forgive, not because what had happened was excusable, but because she needed peace. Her mother, the woman who had pulled the strings for so long, would never be part of her life the same way again. The relationship with Emily was broken, but it wasn't beyond repair. It would take time, lots of it, but Sarah knew that healing would come in her own way, on her own terms. As Sarah looked back on everything that had happened, one thing was clear: no matter how deep the betrayal, how twisted the secrets that